So we're coming into our steepest section here now, where we use the flame trees to stabilize that. They're planted 1.20 meters apart. And now we have this nice understory of Mahoy that we prune back at the same time as we prune back the flame trees once or twice a year. So here, this is definitely our steepest part here, and that's what we anchored with the flame trees. In an earlier video, a couple of months ago, we showed you how we did the pruning of flame trees. So we moved the branches up into the bananas from here, and they're just starting to regrow now with spring coming along. And further up here, where it's not quite as steep and where we bring the mulch to, we have bananas, and you see the cherimoyas coming into full production right now. It's we're in the middle of the season now for cherimoya. You see that eucalypt here, it's a regrowth from an old stump we let go through, and about 8 months ago we completely took every branch of that one here. So you see that regrowth there is 8 months old, and we need to come back now and thin it out again. So that's how we manage the eucalypts. So here we have an area unfortunately plagued by armillaria. So this banana you can see is died off, and here you see the armillaria mycelium going into it. Luckily so far it is only bananas that get affected by that, and we replace bananas a lot with white sapodi because they're meant to be the most resistant to that. So hopefully they stay healthy, and hopefully our lucuma also don't get affected. It would really piss me off if they would get it. And we had one that got it, but it seems to have recovered, funnily enough. So yeah, these are our favorite fruits, lucuma. This area here is one of our favorite zones because there's a really nice diversity here. So about 10 years ago this was just a jungle of longifolia falling over, and macrocarpa, bracken fern and kikuyu and so on. And now what you see, the emergent canopy is inga bean. You see that's in fruit right now. And then we have caro, the native plant, came up by itself, also needing to be up in the emergent layer. We got flame tree that needs to be up in the emergent layer. It is waiting for prune, so that needs to be pruned over the next few weeks. And then the next canopy down is macadamia and bananas. And also joining the high layer is this one behind here, the koi. Yeah, that came with birds, and you see it makes a nice straight growth because it's embedded within all this other forest garden vegetation. So that could potentially make a really good timber in the future, if we ever want to cut it down, of course. It had flowered already, funny enough, being so young still. And you can see the leaves, they are a bit blotchy, they look like they're a bit diseased, and it is a bacterial disease. However, it is a bacteria called Pseudomonas syringae, and particular to that koi. Some plants carry that bacteria on their leaves, and when that bacteria gets taken up by the wind, it creates cloud formation. It's one of those ice minus bacteria that contribute to getting cloud covers that we need. Very important for climate action. And then in and amongst that, we see other natives like the mahoi that I hold here, which is one of our favorites because they're so productive when we prune them. This one here needs to be pruned so we can set it back to where it was cut before, and within a year it would do that again. So a highly productive mulch tree, native, we love it. Then we have some of these weeds inherited. That's arum lily, but what we do, as you see just below, there's a taro. So we are substituting slowly but surely taro for arum lily. So whenever we go through and doing a cleaning here, we cut back or even rip out, in some cases, the arum lilies. If they are next to taros, we rip them out, otherwise we just cut them. We are not in a hurry to get rid of them. But we want to slowly change over to taro, so we substitute them. And then of course we have cherimoya mingled in and amongst as a medium canopy crop. And the taro, as I mentioned, is the low canopy crop, together with some low canopy natives such as hangi, coprosmas, and some emergent other like Nikau palms and whatever else is coming up, Caracas and so on. And here in front of the sleep out that Josh built about 8 years ago, wattle and daub. It's beautifully warm in winter, and we want the sun coming in winter, so we put a fig here so we get the deciduous canopy to let the sun come in and dry this area in winter, and in summer it will give us a nice shade again. So I'll take you further uphill now. Way up we are developing a new site, and let's go through some of the older parts of the food forest still on the way. Coffee. And here one of our favorites, it's Cecropia from the Amazon as well, Cecropia palmata. It is a pioneer tree of disturbed sites in the tropics of South America. It is doing very well here. As you see, it's from the nettle family, the biggest nettle you can find. And you can see that under its shade, the bananas actually still producing quite well. It's quite amazing. It is, by the looks of it, a really good nurse crop for us here, for a lot of plants. And these are our carob trees. So we have female and male plants together all in one cluster here. And they made pots for a few years now. You can see them up there. Unfortunately, with our humidity, they go moldy. So maybe if we had them in more exposed places, they would do better, but here in Northland, the mold is an issue on carob, I reckon. So this up here has been a vegetation that is sort of how the whole slope was at some point. A mix of wattles, Tasmanian blackwood, longifolia, banksia, eucalypts, a few native trees growing in and amongst it. And there was an area we hadn't touched until now. So these ukes, some of those big ones there, they would be about 30 years old now. And so they're now millable. We are cutting it down, using it for firewood, using longer logs to make terraces. And we are planning on putting a woodland dot cabin up there still soon, so you will see that. So here along the roadside where it was too empty still, especially now that we take the trees down, we have a lot of sun coming in. So we made holes into that bank here and put some compost in and so on, and plant one of our starter guilds. Tamarillo, Titonia, Brazilian buttercup shrubs. We put in some sorghum Sudan grass, chicory, black oats, elephant grass, taro, and direct seeded avocado in here for future grafting. So that's how we use these light wells to come with this vegetation groups in a hole that we amended, right? And then in between we fill it up with other grasses. But this is a guild to bring up a tree such as an avocado tree eventually. Oh, here we go. So that's one of our avocados that's direct seeded. Yeah, so later on we will graft it. We just cleaned up this area here recently. It was very overgrown. This was Kikuyu a few years ago. We didn't plant much up because it's just above the studio. But what we did put in then into the Kikuyu was the Titonia that you see resprouting now. And the Titonia worked as a nurse crop for fall trees. So by planting the Titonia, by planting these Titonias about 4 or 5 years ago, they shaded out the Kikuyu. So this was all Kikuyu here, thick Kikuyu. It got shaded out by Titonia. And because we have a lot of fowl on the property, there was seeds flying around. The fowl trees, which are normally not so easily self-propagating here, they came up beautifully underneath the Titonia, handling the shade very well. And because the Kikuyu was gone, they found the right place to germinate underneath Titonias in the shade. And now we are reducing the Titonia and let the fowl take over, because that's what's going to be here more in the long run, because they're more shade tolerant than the Titonia. So Titonia was our herbicide against kikuyu, and at the same time a nurse crop for natives such as these fall trees. And now the fall trees are the understory below inga beans and bananas and macadamias to fill the place and provide us with really nice high quality mulch. So that's how Teutonia can be acting as a nurse crop for native trees. And the fall trees, you can see the staghorn. Yeah, we take most of the leaves off. It rejuvenates them really strongly. They really like the treatment. You can extend the lifespan of falls far beyond what you normally get without management. It keeps them healthy, pruning them. So it looks brutal, but it actually really helps them. So this was an area of about 15 big stone pines that grew here from the previous owner. You can see the stumps now rotting away. We cut them back something like 10 years ago and replaced them with bananas. But before we cut the pines down, maybe 3 years prior to that, 4 years prior to that, we came in, marked contour lines throughout the pine block and planted macadamias, coprosma and caraca on contour. So we had 3 contour lines of those 3 species alternating, and they established beautifully under pines because all of those 3 can work as an understory. Macadamia, no problem growing up in a shade. And then later on we decided to take the pines down in order to get more bananas, and we did that, and we noticed that pines have no negative influence at all on the soil for our future crops. In fact, they really prepared the soil well. We left most of the timber here. We cut up the branches by hand. We didn't put them through a chipper. We put everything on contour to hold our soil in place and keep it as mulch. So hardly anything left as firewood. It was all breaking down here, so that gave us a good start into that new system. And then we kept on adding other plants such as lucuma, tamarillos and sapodi, and with the birds we got heaps of koi coming in, and kawa that came in as an understory. So that was added by the birds. So here kawa, coprosma, macadamia, cherry moya, kawa. These are the caracas that we put in initially underneath the pines. Yeah, so you see this one hasn't been pruned. We could keep them on the lower level if we wanted, and we probably should do that. We are not really interested in the fruit of caraca, so we might as well use it just as a mulch provider. But they're nevertheless a nice element in the system. And this one here is our only tea plant that we put in our system at all. So it was planted right next to the pine tree, and it did really well all the time, even so it is quite shady here. So I wished I had planted more tea as an understory. One thing about tea is, just like koi, it has the ability to associate with these bacteria, the Pseudomonas, and contribute to cloud formation. So tea is a very good example of that too. And the other thing is, if you use it as green tea, like as matcha or whatever, you don't have to ferment it. It makes it simple. And apparently tea that is grown with a lot of shade has much more antioxidants than tea that's grown in sunlight. So that would be interesting, producing your own tea with the aspect of having extra antioxidants because you incorporate it in the lower strata of your food forest. And I mean, it has been going slowly, but surely, and it's a healthy plant. We keep harvesting at it, and I just see it seems to have even self-seeded itself. There's a bit of a seedling here, so I should take some cuttings off it and grow more of it. But obviously it's doing really fine in here despite the lack of sunlight. So we're going up to the top of our section now, to the windy corner. Here's this Banksia, an old Banksia that was here before we did any food foresting. And because it's quite a dominant tree here, a lot of birds come here to roost at night or to rest during the day, and they drop seeds. And because we drove out the Kikuyu that was here, so here all around here was Kikuyu, and with the density of our plantings and the plants that we use, the combination, we turned Kikuyu sod into forest soil, right? See here, all full of roots, and so that's our forest soil now. That used to be Kikuyu, and that provided the right environment for those seeds that the birds drop, be that the mahoi, be that the koi, to thrive in here. And because of the surrounding shade, they grow straight up. They don't turn into these broccolis. So they mingle nicely with our crops. So here is a macadamia. Here's a koi, there's a flame tree, there's a kawa, there's another beautiful straight koi. Here's an older koi. Yeah, here's a tikoka, a cabbage tree. Here's a banana. It's on its way out now. It's sort of getting too much surrounded by trees now. They don't like it so much. Here's a cherimoya that likes the situation, very nice. Right next to it, a very nice, strong, healthy macadamia. Here's more koi and another big koi here. And that would be that probably would only be something like 8-9 years old. So you can see it's really a go for. And then we have the Karo, another native right here, which is a great wind shelter. It's quite sun loving, so at some point this will phase out in favor of these kois. And then also filling up the system at the moment still is this Matipo here. So you can see how these Banksias here that are classified as a weed that one shouldn't have, and well, we didn't plant them, we had them, but how these two Banksia trees and the right management around them worked as a nurse crop for this beautiful cluster of native plants into which we integrated our crops: bananas, cherimoya, macadamias, tamarillos, and so on. And then you still get a nice understory of kava that just comes everywhere here anyway. So you see they live very well together. They would all have the same mycorrhiza. Yeah, they're all endomycorrhizal trees, including the bananas, which are not trees, of course. The interesting thing with Banksia is one of the very few trees that doesn't have mycorrhiza. So they don't do that, they just have a very dense root system instead. Macadamia, however, which is the same family as Banksia and Riva, Proteaceae, they do have mycorrhiza. So certain things don't run through the whole family. Yeah, but all of those minus Banksia would join into the same fungal mat of endomycorrhiza that all these trees would share. So here we're coming to the top corner of our section. So I see we just come out of the area with the Banksias and all these natives and the crops. So this is our top corner here. It's the most wind exposed. We get winds coming from the southwest over the hill here. And this was all dense kikuyu, as you can see on this neighbor section here. So we had the same kikuyu, but we didn't use any plastic or cardboard or anything like that to drive it out. What we did use was Teutonia, tall bunching grasses like sugarcane, elephant grass, in combination with certain natives that can handle kikuyu. Coprosma is a good one for that. And we drove the kikuyu out, and once you have driven it out, it doesn't come back in a hurry. You can open it up. Yeah, so this was a very dense shade to get rid of it, but once you have eliminated it and you have other plants coming in at the ground, so we planted in some cocksfoot in here, some plantains and pine melons and so on, so they do the ground cover that discourages kikuyu from coming in, and then the shade that we constantly prune back, and then it comes up dense again. So this is a recent prune here, and this one here is a relative of the kauri tree and the bancha tree that comes from South America, the pinon. So we give this the same function as would be a kauri tree, but this one will give us a lot of food in maybe 15 years. It would make big cones with edible huge pine nuts this size, and it tastes really nice roasted. So this is a real important food source for indigenous people in South America, the Mapuche in Chile and the Guarani in Brazil. And yeah, so we have hope for that, and it would be looking very similar like a kauri tree in the future, same family. So in this area we just took trees down, and we are not so sure yet where we're gonna build or do anything. So what we started is just marking contour lines, or rather off contour lines with a slight gradient, and planted elephant grass every meter or so, filling in between with other green manure like phacelia, mustards, chicories, and then also sowed lines of blackouts parallel to that. So that gives us a bit of a frame of reference where we put our pathways, and we have already the effect of water harvesting. Water that comes down the hill will soak into these lines because we dug them, we put compost in, and you might have seen the previous film where we planted the elephant grass. We made quite deep soaker holes that we filled with biochar and compost. So any water that runs off and goes along these lines will then soak into these holes and save the water for the summer in the ground. So that's what we have done here, and by the looks of it there's no runoff, no matter what sort of rain we get these days. It all soaks in nicely. The soil is very well developed from this previous vegetation of wattles and gums that we had here. It's kind of a forest soil here, and we want to keep it that way. So once we have opened it up we have to keep planting it up with whatever wants to grow here in order to keep that green cover on as much as possible. Otherwise we lose that soil that these trees have built up over decades now. So as you can hear, it's a very windy day, but you can see how our food forest here works like a windbreak in itself. So we don't have any windbreaks that frame our food forest as you would normally do in horticulture. The whole food forest is a windbreak that is a crop system, that is a native forest, that is a soil building vegetation. It's all in one. So with our different layers we break up the wind. So by the time the wind comes through the emergent and high layer vegetation, the bananas are not getting pummeled as if they were a monoculture. They are framed by all these other emergent trees that break the wind for them. Yeah, so that is the beauty of this multi-layer cropping system. We don't get these turbulences that you get in normal single layer orchards with a single layer windbreak. We have it all broken up, and that softens the wind tremendously. So there's that advantage that we have here. So hope you enjoyed the tour. So we have gone through a food forest from age of 17 years all the way to a reset that is now 4 months old, and we learn every time around that we start anew from the mistakes we made in the last lot, and no doubt we're gonna make more mistakes, but we feel like it gets easier and easier every time. Kikuyu, which used to be a problem for us initially, we can only laugh about that now, and so we solve more and more of these issues, and we are so happy to share them with our Patreon community. So I hope you enjoyed that, and stay tuned.